Hey, welcome, friends. If you're joining us online, welcome to KC201. We're talking about fun and kids today, and we've got some folks in the room with us. Say hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Not only are people joining us live right now, but people also are going to be watching this after the fact. So come on in, have some Deweys. Put on a name tag. We're going to go ahead and get started. I want to begin by just opening it up, since we're talking about fun for the next 2 hours. I just want to open it up and ask two questions at the top. First is, what do you do for fun? We'll go ahead and go around the circle. The reason I think this is a really telling question to ask is I was asked this once at a dinner. Like, my wife and I were going to dinner at this other couple's house, and someone asked me this. Was a few years ago, and like it was like I didn't know. Like I know what I do for fun, but in the moment I was like, oh, I don't know, like what my go-to answer is for that. It was kind of like if you've ever been asked your age, and you're like, I actually don't remember right now. Give me like 2 seconds. Anyway, I'll start. I run for fun. I know that sounds like the opposite of fun for some folks, but I like to run for fun. On my days off, if all things are equal and I don't have anything to do, reading a book or going to watch a movie are kind of equal for me. I just went to see the new Blade Runner movie. It's great. It's also almost 3 hours long, but it's real good. Dan, do you want to go next?
I don't get to do it very often, but I enjoy riding a motorcycle.
I like that riding. And I didn't know that about you. So how long have you done that?
It's been several years, but like I said, with time limitations and stuff, I just don't do it as frequently as I would like to.
Sure. Is that the same for you?
No, I will not ride a motorcycle.
Hey guys, welcome. Come on.
For fun, I'd send him away.
Hey.
No, I would say is anything outdoors that I can, and I'm spending a lot of time with my friends on this too.
I go swing dancing, and I read books, watch movies.
What's your name?
Matt. Sorry, my name's Matt, guys. And outdoor activities and run as well.
So you're training for anything?
Not yet. I don't have time right now.
Yeah, fair.
So I wish.
Yeah.
And I really like to play ultimate frisbee. I never do it as much as I want to, but I generally like being outside, enjoying the really nice weather. And I also have been getting trap shooting more obscure, but I really enjoy that.
Sure. I'm guessing the question is, what do you like to do in your free time?
What do you do for fun?
So, probably I like to do scuba diving, but I haven't been for a while because I have 3 kids. So they're 7, 5, and 4. So most of what we do now is I coach their soccer team, and we're like in ballet and all that kind of stuff. But if it were just me and my husband, we'd scuba diving. Hi, I'm Bea. The things I like to do for fun, I love photography. And I just started getting into yoga. I started last Friday, so not flexible at all, but I'm learning how to be quiet. That's helping me be quiet.
I'm Nate. I used to do ultimate frisbee and trap shooting when I had a lot of time, so you and I need to sync up afterwards. Right now I've been playing men's baseball on Sundays. That's my thing right now.
And that's baseball, not softball.
Not
right?
softball.
Wow, good for you.
It's good times.
That was a good question.
I'm Katie, and I like to play with my dog.
That's cool. That's for sure.
I'm Abby, and some things I like to do, I like to work out, and I like to bake. For like 2 complete opposite things for your health. And I like to travel if I have time and money to do so.
I'm Jeanette. I love playing games like cards and board games, and my small group that I've started focuses on that through the groups. And I'll be doing that this weekend with a group of girlfriends. I also love to read, but like hiking with my dog, going to local parks and just getting out and being outside and taking the little guy with me.
Hey.
Okay, hi, I'm Kristen. I don't have anything consistently that I do, but I guess we'll say I like to knit and outside, being outside, generalized.
So a day where you're knitting outside would be
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Solid day.
Hi, I'm Mike. Let's see, solo, it's going to be reading or video games or baking. But movie dates with my daughter, I will drop everything to do that. Or any kind of sporting event with my son. I love my kids a lot. So.
That's great. And then my follow-up question is, when was the last time you had fun? And I don't mean doing the thing you just said. I mean, when was the last time that you belly laughed? The last time that you felt like things just lift off of you? The last time you danced? The last time you did something like that? And this doesn't have to be everybody sharing, but if you have a time recently, or if you're like, man, it hasn't been that recent, but let me tell you about this time. Feel free to share. Today, what'd you do today?
Well, we have our 1-year-old grandson over, and he wanted to dance. And I was getting ready to shave, so I put shaving cream on my face and came down and danced with him. And he seemed to enjoy it.
That's cute. He loves
That's
music, so he loves to dance. This little one, so it's fun.
Sweet. I like that it involved a kid too. That's great.
So we have chickens in our backyard, and we also have bunnies. And last week, the bunnies and the chickens got out, and we had to chase them all over the neighborhood. And that was like the funniest thing because like I'm chasing the chickens and the bunnies. I have my 4-year-old chasing the chickens and the bunnies. My dog and my cat think we're on safari, so they're following us through the neighborhood. The neighbors are all out, like trying to help us, like, oh, there's a bunny over there. Oh, the chicken's over there. And like, everybody is just dying laughing because we're like crawling under the cars and crawling under people's porches and catching all the chickens and rabbits.
That sounds maybe stressful, but I'm glad it was fun.
My husband didn't think we could catch them all. He was a little skeptical, but we caught all 4 chickens and all 3 rabbits. So
Well done.
I was happy.
That story easily could have gone a different direction.
Yeah, yeah, but thankfully it all worked out. So
Anybody else? When was the last time you just had fun?
I took my 81-year-old mother on vacation with me, which doesn't sound like fun. And it was a 2-week kind of adventure we had. And we ended up having a really good time. And I thought we'd be on each other's nerves like the 3rd day, but we didn't. We had so much fun. And we laughed and we giggled and we went weird places like the RV museum and just weird different places. Plus we saw Hamilton. I took her to see Hamilton. She had no idea what hip hop was. So she got a real good education while we were in Chicago. And we ended up like just having little funny jokes and giggling, and which I've never done with my mom, you know? So it was just fun.
I have 2. Yesterday was with my 3-year-old girls and a nanny. Their imagination is exploding right now, and I love it. Anything they say makes me laugh. And I try to think back to that show, Kids Say the Strangest Things, because they do say the strangest things. And then today, actually I found it yesterday, but today I listened to it, a new album called Every Day to Jesus by James Anthony. And he is an amazing gospel singer. And every song, I was like jumping for Jesus. I was like, yeah, God, this is awesome. Like in my car, belting it out. I was like, it's summer all over again. My windows are down. So 2 good days so far. 2 good days. It's great.
We'll take one more. One more.
I was with my girlfriend at Blink on Saturday night. No set plan.
Oh.
Just walked around.
Yeah.
Had tons of squirrel moments. It was great.
All
All those lights.
Oh,
All
yeah.
those lights.
And how long did Blink go?
For like 4 days. It was awesome.
I kept
So
seeing
very cool.
posts all over social media
Yeah.
about, I haven't seen this many people downtown.
It was Sunday.
Packed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Packed.
horrible.
Like, yeah.
We
Zero
went on
crimes.
Thursday night and it was still like,
Yeah.
It was packed from Smale all the way past Washington Park. That's
So
what packed the
even
streets were.
like
It was packed. There was zero crime. This was a family event. And the main
Tons of
draw
kids were
wasn't
out.
beer
Yeah.
Right.
or something like
Right.
that. Like,
Right.
that's
Tons of kids were out.
Till like midnight.
Yeah. It was like, it was just fun to see them around because they just added another
And
aspect
it
to
was
it.
about art.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
our kids were dancing under the giant disco ball and they were just having a ball.
I like the teeter totters.
Well, that's cool. I wanted to begin by asking that question because I believe that you are meant to have fun. I believe that Kids Club is meant to be fun, and I believe that after tonight, we'll have a deeper sense of what that means spiritually, intellectually, emotionally, all that stuff. And I'm excited to get started. But before we do, let me just pray for all of us. I'll retroactively pray for the food as well. God, thanks for new things. You're a God that's always making new stuff. And this is a new idea, KC 201. So I just ask that you bless it and save me from the temptation to talk about myself too much. Save me from the temptation to talk too much about Kids Club. I want to talk about you. I want us all to grow a little bit closer to you in this process tonight. So bless the food that is probably going through our digestive systems right now. Bless our conversation. Bless our brains and our hearts to learn what you have for us. None of this stuff matters unless we're looking more like Jesus in the process. So help us to do that. Amen.
Yeah.
So just a quick word of introduction. I don't know all of you necessarily super well, so just a quick introduction. I'm the director of Kids Club Oakley. I'm your Kids Club Oakley director. If you're joining us from another site, I might not be your site director, but I'm the director here at Oakley. And prior to that, I led the kindergarten and 5th grade teams here, which now Kristen Fissinger leads. And prior to that, I worked as an actor, director, playwright, acting instructor for the Children's Theater of Cincinnati. They're about to do Peter Pan coming up in like just a week or so. If any of you are going downtown to the TAF to see that, that's the show where I met my wife. I played Peter Pan. She played Wendy. That was a while back.
We are
So-
going.
You are going?
Yeah, my kids go to SCPA,
Oh, right on.
and so both of their classes are going down.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'll be fun.
very cool. The current artistic director of SCPA was my boss at the Children's Theater,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, she can.
and she was a judge at Big. All the worlds are colliding. Anyway, and my experiences there at the Children's Theater helped me to learn where fun and education can intersect. A lot of what I did was creating experiences, theater experiences for kids, where they would learn something in the process and or making study guides that needed to be connected to the fun experience that they had, as well as doing acting classes and workshops. And when I started coming to Crossroads and started volunteering in the Kids Club, it was a watershed moment for me because I was like, these guys do it right. I'm thrown into situations where I'm like in the middle of a gymnasium with no microphone, no screen behind me, no videos to throw to or anything like that. And 45 minutes to teach them like 5 tools of an actor. And like being in a situation like that, you just learn to get scrappy and you learn to just make the most of whatever situation you end up in. In a lot of ways, I think that job very much prepared me for the role that I have here. And I want to share with you tonight some of the things that have influenced me as a person who, I'm not an expert on fun, I'm not an expert on kids, but I've got some experience and I've been exposed to some stuff that I think by exposing you guys to it to have some good conversations. I'm also a huge podcast fan. I don't know if you guys are into podcasting at all. but we'll talk about some of the things that I listen to later that have to do with Kids Club. But if you have a podcast that you really love, I really want to hear about it. Pablo's back there. Pablo turned me on to a podcast called Reply All, which is amazing. Been listening to that a lot. Thank you. Aren't you glad you showed up tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dinner.
Anyway, so that's me kind of in a nutshell. And tonight we're talking about fun and kids. We're going to talk about what kids are watching. We're going to talk about how to lead a game. Spoiler alert, there will be some audience participation for that part. And then we'll go over some presenter basics. Some of you have been through a course I've done called Speaker Sessions, where we go really deep into presentation. We're just going to kind of skim over the surface of presentation tonight. And we are a fun team here at Kids Club. We try to be a fun team anyway. And it leads us to do all kinds of stuff like this.
This is a hard one. Crack this on your head, nothing bad really happens. This is a raw egg. Or is it? Crack this on your head, and you get a gooey, yolky surprise all over your cranium. The question is, will it break?
This is all Crossroads staff, by the way. Just for context, we shot that video during the December shutdown for Awaited, so nothing really was going on in the building, and everybody's just kind of marking time on different things instead of like normal stuff that's happening in the building. And when we got an all-staff email that was like, if you're willing to crack an egg on your head, report to the atrium. Like, all of us were coming out, and I have to say, it was one of the most fun days being in this building for me. And it wasn't just because we were doing this video, it was because when you do something fun, you get to know people in just a different way. You get to know them at a different level. And that's why intentionally, fun is part of our mission in Kids Club. We make fun, welcoming, and safe environments for kids, families, and volunteers to experience God and grow in their faith. Tonight, I hope, is a fun, welcoming, and safe experience for you to experience God and grow in your faith a little bit more. What we're focusing on today are these things: fun, kids, and grow. Ultimately, the goal of everything in Kids Club isn't just to keep kids entertained. It's not just to keep them busy. It's for them to experience God and grow in their faith. And we believe that when the environment is safe, kids will have a better time doing that. When they've been welcomed into that space in a kid-friendly way, they'll do that better. And if it's fun, they're primed for it. And it's going to be even better. So, I want us to begin by imagining if Kids Club were not fun. If we did everything else on this mission statement, except fun was not part of it. And we can all probably think of environments that kids have been in or that you were in as a kid that was safe and welcoming, but not very fun. Does anybody want to call out some of those?
School.
School.
Sunday school.
Sunday school. Yeah, right on.
Dance.
Dance class, sure.
Just like church in general as a kid.
Yeah, church in general is very safe. And probably
Yeah.
people like saying, hey, we're so glad you're here. And they're very fun.
Yes.
Right. Any other places you can think of? In my work at the Children's Theater, I'd often go to different daycares, and some daycares do fun, welcoming, and safe amazingly. Sadly, there's a lot of daycares that do safe and welcoming very well, but the environment, despite all the color and the toys, is like zero fun, a zero fun environment. Anybody think of anything else? Any experiences you had as a kid where you were like, this isn't fun at all?
Sunday school.
Great. So that's like a recurring theme, and we want to come against that. We believe that there's more for kids in the process. So we'll talk about these in a second. I don't have a tangible Bible in here, but if anybody has a Bible app or something like that, can somebody look up Matthew 19:13-14? If you got it, just say got it. And then if somebody else wants to look up Luke 18:15-17, if you got that, just say got it. And if you're tuning in, go ahead and just tab over and Google it.
I have Matthew 19.
All right, go ahead with Matthew 19.
Then children were brought to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray, but the disciples rebuked them. Jesus said, "Leave the children alone, and do not try to keep them from coming to me, because the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these."
Cool.
Now they were bringing even infants to him that he might touch them. And when the disciples saw it, they rebuked them. But Jesus called them to him, saying, "Let the children come to me, and do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of God. Truly, I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a child shall not enter it."
Cool. Thanks for reading, guys. So these two different verses, these two different sections describe, maybe it's the same event, maybe it's something that happened several times, but we know that the Gospels were written decades after Jesus goes up into the sky, right? So this was important enough to the guys who hung out with Jesus that when they were writing down the stuff that everybody needs to know about Jesus, they included this. Why on earth would they include that? I'm asking the room. Why would they include that?
The same reason they included things on little widows and those who are kind of ostracized or outside of the limits.
Sure. And so this becomes kind of maybe the root of what I think James says, that like pure religion is helping widows and orphans, like there's that focus on kids perhaps. Sure. What else?
I also think as adults we get cynical and jaded and we lose wonder with things. And I've always looked at these verses as having a childlike wonder about your faith and the experiences that can bring. So we lose that sometimes in the adult world with all the seriousness stuff that adults have to deal with.
Yeah.
And so it's a reminder for me to step back. And that's when I'm with kids, it's kind of a reminder of this is a whole different world and gives me different perspective.
Sure. Sure. Anybody else have a thought as to why this appears in two Gospels? And there's no right or wrong answer. I don't know necessarily the answer, but I've got some ideas.
For me, I think a lot of adults underestimate children. So many children blow my mind in Kids Club by the things they say. I'm like, how do you even know that? Or how did you even come up to think that way? And to have it spark me, I'm like, okay, that's where my faith needs to be. It's such a pure and innocent level that I get so caught up in my world of being an adult and being busy and focusing on the next show that's coming on Netflix that I forget to like just have fun and enjoy the playground that God has given me. And these kids see it every day. And I love coming to Kids Club and just embracing it, which is why I recruit a lot of adults to come in, because if they're having a hard time struggling to learn about God, come and learn from kids, because they will give it to you full blown, no problem.
Yeah, right, exactly. I think that reminds me of, I don't know what book of the Bible it's in, Timothy or Thessalonians or something like that, where a person specifically says, don't let anybody look down on you because you're young, but set an example for others. You know, if we walked into Kids Club with that in mind, like how different would our serving experience be? That I have as much to learn from what kids are going to say to me and what they're going to do as I can model for them. That's all good. That's all good stuff. I believe Jesus was fun. I believe Jesus was fun. When was the last time that kids wanted to go and hang out with an adult who was not fun? So, reading between the lines just a little bit, Jesus was fun. Like, he's in a crowd with all his guys, and kids are like, that's the guy, right? Like, he's the ice cream man or something like that. That's Also, we see in the story, there's a detail there that Jesus does not resent those who bring the kids. And remember, this is like first century. So think of the family unit. There's no such thing as an orphanage yet because the people who followed Jesus haven't founded it for a few centuries. There's no such thing as a public school system. There's no teachers like taking kids along because followers of Jesus have not founded a school system. So who is bringing these kids? It's got to be family. It's got to be folks in the neighborhood. And they're coming. There's a bunch of them coming to the point that it inconveniences the adults around Jesus. And Jesus says, bring them. Don't resent the people who are bringing these kids. I think what's going on there is he's saying these kids are not a burden to me. They're not a burden. So don't wish for fewer of them to come. Don't wish that they would just go away. Like, I think the word he uses in some translations is suffer. Like, I'm willing to suffer so that these kids can come, right? How much different would our serving experience be if we walked in, instead of expecting kids to just obey us and do the right things and show the right behaviors, we went in, I'm here to serve. I'm here to suffer so that they have an experience. So Jesus did not resent those who brought the kids, and then he finally tells us to see the world as kids do. I think one translation says like, the kingdom belongs to such as these. And some translations say, you will not see the kingdom unless you are like one of these. It's kind of like he's saying both of those things at the same time. So I think as we kind of frame this up in our minds, I want to be clear. I'm not coming at this because I think you should all do what Kids Club says to do. I don't even think you should, in some cases, do what Crossroads tells you to do. You should do what Jesus tells us to do, all right? And if we are going to be experiencing God and growing in our faith, it's critical that we have this in our minds, that having fun and being around kids and being the kind of person that can facilitate that is something Jesus did. And he did it in a moment, or maybe several moments, that decades later, his followers were like, if you want to understand Jesus' personality, who he was, you got to remember this day when there were all these kids coming up and we wanted him to stop. Like, come on, we have things to do, we have people to reach. And he stopped and he made time. And he didn't rebuke the people who brought the kids. He corrected us. We needed to be corrected there. I think that's important. With all that said, let's go into what kids are watching. And I think there's a risk for me to sound a little bit like kids these days. You know, like, oh, they're just watching whatever. I think in general, it's safe to say that for the first time, or maybe just, maybe not the first time, but in history, in American history especially, kids are exposed to almost exactly the same stuff that we're exposed to. It's getting really democratic. Parental controls are kind of going away, like it's kind of getting gray. Kids are seeing things way before they're supposed to be seeing them. Statistics are really, really troubling in that way. So I don't want to sound like kids these days, but kids these days, man, like they're seeing all kinds of stuff. What I wanted to do was show you a couple of videos that give us a sense of the kinds of content kids are exposed to, at least video-wise. All of these are things you can find on YouTube. If you're tuning in online, it might be more helpful for you to go ahead and tab over and just look up some of these things on YouTube instead of trying to watch it on our little screen here. The first one is a video about a YouTube channel called Family Fun Pack. which is just like a typical American family. It calls them the Family Fun Pack. And they just go to stuff. They travel around, they go on roller coasters, they go to all kinds of stuff. They have 16 or 14.6 million views. Like, this isn't like nobody's watching. Like, people are watching this. Then we'll watch some Minecraft. Look at that. 64 million views on Minecraft. I barely even understand Minecraft. You understand Minecraft?
Yes, and that's just Pocket Edition. Overall, Minecraft, you'd probably see stuff in the millions.
Right on. Right.
Well, no, not like maybe like 100 million or like 200 million. That's just like the one version of Minecraft. Like there's so much more, and like a lot of content comes from modern Minecraft and the Java edition.
Yeah. Thank you for telling us that, because I can guarantee no one else in this room knew that. No one else in this room knew that kind of stuff. Our audience, right? So, without further ado, we'll just watch a few videos.
There's a lot you can do in one day. Good morning. Especially when you're the most popular family on YouTube. From the day wrangling 5 kids on set.
We're celebrating today because we just reached 2 million subscribers!
To celebrating when hard work pays off.
We got ourselves the world's largest pizza.
But even work can be a lot of fun. Wherever they go and whatever they do, a day with this family is one we'll never forget.
Guys, this is the most fun we've had in the longest time. Everybody ready? 1, 2, 3.
But don't forget, there's always tomorrow.
We're about to go roller skating for the first time as a family today. First stop, Star Tours. Whoa! What is that? Are you having fun?
Join Christine and Matt with their kids. Here's Alyssa, David, Zach, Chris, and don't forget baby Michael.
Every day is the best day with you guys.
So that's one. So one thing I think is interesting there is after the experiences, the mom or the dad almost always asks the kids the same question. And I would submit that every single kid walking out of Kids Club after every single service is asking the same question as well. Did you have fun? And we want that answer in Kids Club always to be yes. Yes, I had fun. Because if they ask that first question and they get yes, parents then will ask the second question, which is, what did you learn? Exactly. Did you have fun? What did you learn? If the answer is no to that first question, the second question doesn't happen. That shuts down the conversation. That puts a parent in a mode of, oh no, what happened? Did something happen, right? So, I just wanted to tag that in. Next is the Minecraft video. I don't understand any of that. What I do know from talking with some kids on the weekend and in other circles is Minecraft is part of how a lot of kids learn some social skills, how to interact with other people, how to cooperate on things. You got to build stuff. You got to get from one place to the next. You need other people to do that. You need resources to do that. And they're learning some of those basics. Whereas before, maybe you would learn it by being sent to the corner store, being sent to the grocery to like do something. They're learning it in these kind of virtual environments, which is fascinating, and lots of other adjectives as well, right? Like it's just really, really kind of intriguing. Anyway, that's a game that's pretty pretty popular. And then let's watch the trailer. Has anybody seen the Lego Ninjago movie? Anybody seen that? Did you see
It was
it?
good.
You saw it?
I've seen all the Lego.
Gotcha. Well, if you're like, I don't know what that is, check this out.
Baby, now we got bad blood. So take a look what you've done. 'Cause baby, now we got bad blood.
Hey, Mom, can we talk about So, when you guys got together, was Dad always an evil warlord?
Okay, well, here it is. I got swept up. He had so many plans. He was so ambitious. He said he wanted to conquer the world. I thought it was a figure of speech. If I had never met Garmadon, I would have never had you. His dad ruins everything. Uh-oh, it's Garmadon!
I got the best! Because it's scared. Students, a true ninja knows when to fight and when to play in the shadows. Unbelievable.
Alright guys, let's get Garmadon!
You can't catch me, Green Ninja.
What's this?
Ow. Where'd that come from?
Hello, Dad.
Lloyd.
That's right, and it's Lloyd, Dad.
'Cause baby, now we got bad blood. Just to be bad.
It's okay, Lloyd. Nobody's parents are perfect.
Yeah, but I feel like there's more to Garmadon that I need to know. To understand your future, you must go back to your ninja roots. Your dad was a ninja too. Oh, Lloyd, you hear that? We awaken the unstoppable beast. Meowthra. Are you ready to risk your life for Ninjago?
I haven't felt this good in a long time.
Lloyd, are you okay?
Yeah, I think it was my arm. Is it bad? Is it bad? I don't want to look. Scale of 1 to 10. How bad is it?
Oh, I'd say it's about a 7-point arm ripped off. This film's not yet rated.
I think it is rated now.
Yeah.
I want to present that without comment and then just show you one that's targeted to definitely a different demographic.
There's me, Twilight Sparkle. I have amazing friends who are there for me no matter what.
Where you gonna go? Here's the deal. I need your magic.
She might have got away. I know you're disappointed, but I got one word for you. Sponge cake.
Easy as pie.
Oh, I love pie.
I'm so glad I saved you guys.
Richard, the flowers, the ponies. Fish man just got dropped.
Charming's my game.
Time for my seaweed wrap.
You know what they say. Where there's a city, there's a school. Who says that?
Let's show these little ponies how it's done.
Hiya.
Your ponies are crazy.
My Little Pony, the movie, rated PG, in theaters October 6th.
Notice with these, anything that's kind of in common?
It's pretty funny.
It's funny, right? It's making us laugh.
Right.
Which is interesting.
Very vibrant.
Yeah, very
Colors.
Well, with the movies, there's always like an obstacle to overcome, and then people working together to overcome the obstacle.
What are some things that are very clearly being marketed through this? Either products or ideas or concepts or whatever.
Legos, My Little Ponies.
Some of the most popular YouTube channels right now are just adult hands playing games with toys with like a link to buy them, which is interesting. What are some themes that you see in both of those trailers? Think around as kids are taking in the story, like subliminal kinds of things they may be learning. Because this. I don't want to get all conspiracy theorist.
There's like a team. There's a group. I don't know My Little Pony that well, but I did watch the first Lego movie. but there's a group of them that kind of work together to fight good and evil or whatever it is.
So friendship is definitely a huge thing. What are some themes around authority or family? And not to say like these are bad movies, but just what's kind of in the air? What's in the water of some of these?
Family, and I don't know if it's new to this generation, but family is always where the kids have to break out of in order to be successful and beat the bad guy. Family is rarely, there's a couple exceptions. Family is rarely the unit at which we grow from.
But friends are.
Friends are, of course, yes. Because they understand us better.
Friends are where you find out what's really going on. Friends are where you get a sense of who your parents really are. Any other thoughts on this? Some things that I take away, they're absolutely very vibrant and colorful. I like that our spaces in Kids Club are very dazzling and stuff. There's a sense of epicness. That's kind of what you were talking about. Like, there's like a real world that's going on out there. I'm not really part of it yet, and these stories kind of take us there. There are some parent and authority issues in there too. About that in particular, I think about, and to your point, it existed for years and years before this. But I think of Shrek as a franchise that really started marketing not just to kids, but to their parents as well. The idea being like parents would be more likely to bring their kids to this movie if there are some jokes in there for us, if there are some things that make us laugh. And just think about the phenomenon of a kid being in a movie theater watching this thing. If they're watching and something happens on screen where the kid's parent is made fun of, or like that scene in the bus where all the kids go to one side, like your dad ruins everything. And if parents laugh at that, because that's aimed at us, the 9-year-old kid sitting there who notices his parents laugh at that, what does that teach that kid? I don't want to speak for every single kid, but the point is, this is in the water, this is in the air. the kinds of content that kids are able to go and see all the time. So there's a little bit of parent authority issues. It's not new, but it's there. And there's a lot of stuff that's kind of geared towards outdoors, things that kids are watching with Minecraft or the Family Fun Pack, with both of these movies. There's a high emphasis on things happening like in the sky or in some kind of adventurous, epic landscape or something like that. But most of the time that a kid be watching this, they're probably not going to be outside, right? They're going to be indoors.
Mm-hmm.
So more and more, this is becoming the portal to the outdoors,
Mm-hmm.
which is, again, just interesting. It's important for us to understand what kids are watching and kind of the context they're in if we're going to try to speak into that space at all. If we're going to try to speak to kids in a language they understand, we need to know the language they understand, which more and more is this thing. So it's that. Before we move on to that, anybody have any thoughts or any clarifying questions before we go on to reading? This might feel a little bit like drinking from a fire hose. I'm sorry if that's the case. Great. So what we're going to do for this next section, how to lead a game, if you got to go to the bathroom or something like that, feel free to do this at any time, particularly for this. We're going to watch a TED Talk called The Decline of Play, given by Dr. Peter Gray. If any of you took Psych 101 in college, there's a really good chance that the textbook he wrote and edited, Psychology, is the one he studied. He's got a thing on the decline of play. We'll talk about that a little bit after that video. The video is a little over 10 minutes long. And then we'll have mad props for having a Hamilton ringtone. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. That was young.
I thought it was on.
And then we'll watch a video of the 7 sins of game reading, which is pretty fun. So without further ado, again, if you're tuning in online, it's probably better to just tab over to YouTube and look up The Decline of Play. It's a TED Talk by Dr. Peter Gray. Oh, and he's written books. And he teaches courses.
I'm a researcher who studies play from a biological evolutionary perspective. I'm interested in the reasons why play came about in the course of natural selection. I'm interested in the evolutionary function of play. So I'm going to start with animals. Young mammals of essentially all species play. In play, they develop fit bodies, they practice physical skills that are crucial to their survival, and they also practice social and emotional skills. By playing together, they learn to cooperate with one another, they learn to be in close vicinity with one another without losing their tempers, very important for social animals to develop. In risky play, they learn to take risks, to experience fear without losing their heads, a lesson that can save their lives in the course of a real emergency. Researchers have conducted laboratory experiments in which they've deprived young animals, usually this is done with rats, but sometimes with monkeys, of the opportunity to play as they're growing up. And they've developed ways of doing this without depriving them of other social experiences. At least with rats, they've built ways of doing this. The result is that when these young animals develop, they are socially and emotionally crippled. When you place one of these play-deprived animals in a somewhat novel, somewhat frightening environment, they overreact with fear. They freeze in the corner, they don't adapt to it, they don't explore the environment as a normal animal would. If you place one of these play-deprived animals with an unfamiliar peer, they alternately freeze in fear and lash out with inappropriate, ineffective aggression. They don't learn to respond to the social signals of the other animal. It's not surprising that those mammals that have the largest brains and that have the most to learn are the ones that we find play the most. And given that, it should be no surprise at all that human children, when they're free to do so, play far, far more than do the young of any other mammals. A few years ago, one of my graduate students and I conducted a survey of anthropologists who had observed hunter-gatherer cultures in various isolated parts of the world. We asked them questions about children and play in the cultures that they observed. Every single one of these 10 different anthropologists who had studied hunter-gatherer cultures 3 different continents told us that the children in the culture that they studied, including the young teenagers, were free to play and explore on their own without adult guidance all day long, from dawn to dusk, essentially every day. The adults in these cultures, when asked, say, we have to let them play because that's how they learn the skills that they need to acquire to grow into adulthood. Some of these anthropologists told us that the children that they observed in these cultures are among the brightest, happiest, most cooperative, most well-adjusted, most resilient children that they had ever observed anywhere. So from a biological evolutionary perspective, play is nature's means of ensuring that young mammals, including young human beings, acquire the skills that they need to acquire to develop successfully into adulthood. From a religious perspective, we might say that play is God's gift that makes life on earth worthwhile. Now here's the sad news. Here's really what I'm here to talk about. Over the last 50 to 60 years, we've been gradually taking that gift away. Over this period of time, there's been a continuous erosion in children's freedom and opportunity to play, to really play freely. This has been documented in various ways by historians and social scientists, and I'm old enough that I've seen it in the course of my lifetime. In the 1950s, when I was a child, we had ample opportunity to play. We had school, but school was not the big deal that it is today. Some people might not remember, but the school year then was 5 weeks shorter than it is today. The school day was 6 hours long, but at least in elementary school, 2 of those hours were outdoors play. We had half-hour recess in the morning, half-hour recess in the afternoon, a full hour of lunch. We could go wherever we wanted in that period. We were never in the classroom more than an hour at a time or for 4 hours a day. It just wasn't a big deal. And homework for elementary school children was essentially unheard of. There was some homework for high school students, but much, much less than today. Out of school, we had chores, some of us had part-time jobs, but for the most part, we were free to play for hours a day after school, all day on weekends, all summer long. I like to say that when I was a kid, I had school and I also had a hunter-gatherer. At that time, you could walk through any neighborhood in America, almost any time the school was in session, and you would find kids outdoors playing without any adults around. Now, if you walk through most neighborhoods in the United States, what you find, if you find kids outdoors at all, is they're wearing uniforms, they're on some kind of manicured field, they're following the directions of adult coaches while their parents are sitting on the sidelines cheering their every move. We call this play sometimes, but it isn't by any play researcher's definition. It's not really play. Play, by definition, is self-controlled and self-directed. It's the self-directed aspect of nature, of play, that gives it its educative power. Here are some of the reasons why play has declined. One, of course, is the increased rate of school. But an even more important reason, as important as that one is, I think an even more important reason for the decline of play has been the spread outside of the school walls of what I call a schoolish view of child development. The view that children learn best everything from adults, that children's own self-directed activities with other children are wastes of time. We don't often say it that way, but that's the implicit understanding that underlies so much of our policy with regard to children. So childhood has turned from a time of freedom to a time of resume building. Another reason, of course, has to do with the spread of fears, really mostly irrational fears, spread by the media, spread by experts who are constantly warning us of the dangers out there if we don't watch our children every minute that they're out there. Many people recognize the absurdity of some of these extreme fears, But yet, once we get them in their head, it's hard to shake them. I know many parents who would love to let their kids play outdoors, and they think it would be great to, but they just can't get rid of that idea. In addition, there's a kind of self-generative quality to the decline of play. Once there are fewer kids out there playing, the outdoors becomes less attractive. It also becomes less safe. So that kid who does go outdoors finds nobody to play with and goes back inside. Now, I don't want to romanticize the 1950s. There's a lot of ways in which we're a much better world today than we were then. But we are a much worse world. Over the same decades that play has been declining, we have seen a well-documented increase in all sorts of mental disorders in childhood. The best evidence for this comes from the use of standardized clinical assessment questionnaires. Based on such assessments, 5 to 8 times as many children today suffer from major depression or from a clinically significant anxiety disorder, as was true in the 1950s. And this has been a continuous, gradual, roughly linear increase over the years. Very well documented. Over this same period, we've seen among young people from age 15 to 24 a doubling of the suicide rate. We've seen among children aged 15 and under a quadrupling of the suicide rate. Over this same period of time, the suicide rate for people my age has gone down considerably. We've become a worse world for children, not necessarily a worse world for adults, and maybe a better world for us older adults. We've also seen a decline in the sense that young people's sense that they have control over their own lives. There's a questionnaire called the Internal-External Locus of Control Scale. There's a version of this for children as well as for adults. It's been given since about 1960. Ever since it's been given, we've seen a decline, a continuous decline in children and young adults' sense that they have control over their own lives. They have more and more of a sense that their lives are controlled by fate, by circumstance, by other people's decisions. Now, this is significant in terms of the relationship between anxiety and depression, because one thing clinical psychologists know very well is that not having an internal sense of control sets you up for anxiety and depression. More bad news. We've also seen in fairly recent years, due to questionnaires that have been given out since about 1980, a rise in narcissism in young people and a decline in empathy. And most recently, there's been research studies analyzing results of tests of creativity over the years, which show that there's been a gradual decline in creative thinking among children, school children of all grades, since about the mid-1980s. Now, of course, as any social scientist will tell you, correlation doesn't prove cause and effect. But in this case, I think that there is good reason to believe that the decline in play is the cause of these deleterious changes. For one thing, the correlation is very good, especially the correlation between the decline in play, which seems to be roughly linear, beginning around 1955 on through today, correlates very well with the roughly linear increase in anxiety and depression among young people. It doesn't correlate with things like economic cycles or wars. Children are more depressed today than they were during the Great Depression, more anxious today than they were during the Cold War, when they were continuously being warned of the threat of nuclear holocaust that could happen at any time. In addition, play, everything we know about play tells us that these are the effects we would expect if children are deprived of play. They're analogous to the effects we see in animals when we take play away from animals. Play is where children learn that they're in control of their own life. It's really the only place they are in control of their own life. When we take that away, we don't give them a chance to learn how to control their own life. Play is where they learn to solve their own problems. They learn, therefore, that the world is not so scary after all. Play is where they experience joy, and they learn the world is not so depressing after all. Play is where they learn to get along with peers and see from others' points of view and practice empathy and get over narcissism. Play is by definition creative and innovative. Of course, if you take away play, all these things are going to go down. And yet, the hue and cry that we hear everywhere is for more school, not for more play. We really got to change that. So I'm told that it's always good to end on a positive note. I don't want to be the only depressing speaker here. So I'm going to say, look, let's admit this is our fault. We have done this to children in this world. Let's start by admitting that. But then let's say we can do something about it. The first thing we need to do is to recognize that it's a problem. And once we've recognized it's a problem, then we need to figure out how to solve that problem. We need to have an internal sense of control and know that we can solve this problem. We have to begin by examining our own priorities. What do we really want for our kids, and how do we achieve it? We have to get to know our neighbors, develop neighborhood networks, because it's in neighborhoods that children make friends and develop playmates. And by getting to know our neighbors, we can convince ourselves that the neighborhood, after all, is a safe place to play. That neighbor isn't a child molester after all, once we get to know him. We need also to establish places for children to play. They kind of disappeared. We've even taken away sidewalks. We need to do things like open up gymnasiums, school gymnasiums after school for free play. We need to do things like put a supervisor in the park so parents will feel it's safe enough to leave their kid there to play. A supervisor who knows how to keep things safe enough but not intervene or interfere. We need to do things like close off city streets during certain hours so kids can once again reclaim the street as a place to play. And we need to do things like develop adventure playgrounds of the kind that are relatively common in Europe and becoming once again more so. And perhaps most of all, we need to be brave enough to stand up against the continuous clamor for more school. Our children don't need more school. They need less school. Maybe they need better school, but they don't need more school. So with that, I'm going to conclude, and then thank you very much for coming. I bless you, and I hope that you will all do what you can to help bring play back to your neighborhood and to children everywhere. Thank you.
I want Dr. Gray to I want Dr. Gray to be my sensei. So what I take away from that, a few things that I wanted to lift out. We're not just talking about why to lead games, or not just how, but why. Is he says play is nature's means of ensuring young mammals acquire the skills they need to acquire. And then he follows that up with play is God's gift that makes life on earth worthwhile. And I know towards the end he kind of starts proposing solutions that are pretty clearly agenda driven and things like that. But the world he describes sounds like a fun place to me, for sure. Excuse me. Any reactions to that video or anything that stood out that you'd like to share with the group?
When I was 16 years old, I wrote, I think it was a 12 or 13 page paper about why my sisters aren't allowed to play outside, because they were much younger than me, why they weren't allowed to play outside. And the statistics that I found at such a young age were 40 years ago, you were allowed to do this, and now people are too scared to send their kids to the park, and it's 11 years later and it's still that way. And the girls that I nanny, I am not that. I am go, be free, because I see it. I see the fear, and my mom let us do whatever we wanted. And I think my family and I have a lot of creativity. So it's so cool how 11 years ago I wrote a paper about why my sisters aren't allowed to do things that people were allowed to do years and years ago. It's still that way.
So it's your fault.
Sometimes I think, and I don't want to get too the negative side, but we don't send our kids out to play in the neighborhood because of a predator in the neighborhood. But there's predators all over the world. And by spending so much time in some places, we are exposing them to more danger than we would by just letting them go play.
That's interesting thought, yeah. I've noticed that lately there's been a kind of resurgence of nostalgic, like 80s style Stranger Things. If you went to see it, which is also really great, it has that feel of like a Spielberg movie from the 80s, like E.T., of that outdoor kind of childhood where real danger is encountered, real stuff happens. These kids learn and band together, kind of a Goonies kind of thing. But it's resurging, and ironically, we're all watching it here. Like we're living vicariously through these really well produced shows and stuff, but we're watching these things indoors more and more.
That's why I loved Washington Park, because they had movies all summer long outside. And so I got to know a lot of people I'd never met before. Like Hairspray Night, that was awesome. I met so many people just by going out and watching a movie outside with them.
Yes.
So actually, probably online play is becoming a little bit more dangerous than like actual play, because now, like with the rise of like say Roblox is a big one, becoming more and more popular amongst kids. More and more prejudice, instead of like walking outside, are going into like video games and trying to get kids that way. And also, sometimes video games can help kids be creative, because a big aspect was, say, going back to Minecraft, is like you say like build like this really cool house, and you can show your friends, hey, look, I had this house. So going back to and I remember you said earlier that like sometimes like these games can help like kids be more social, and yeah.
That's a good point. And to your point, where Kids Club is kind of going in the future is into uncharted territory, especially for churches. We're trying to figure out, how do we do Kids Club here? It's got to be more than just play a video. It's got to be more than just like read a Bible verse. Like this, it can't just become like Christian TV here, you know. So it's a really interesting thing that we're still trying to crack and kind of wrap our minds around that creatively. It kind of feels like we're always struggling to keep up in that way. But it's an interesting thought that you could do a Kids Club small group through iPads and phones. And that's not like in the future. That's like, we could just overturn everything and start doing that tomorrow. If that sounds like strange, or if that sounds like that's definitely not the Kids Club I want to be a part of, stick at a site. Keep volunteering at a site. Keep showing up here, because this kind of Kids Club is not going away. It's not going away anytime soon. For some of the things that we could get into. Great. Any other thoughts, kind of from the TED Talk?
Curious, with the multiple generations in the room, what people's play experience has been. I mean, I grew up a long time ago, and
still growing up.
Still growing up, but my mother said every day, go outside, just go outside. And I actually lived in a neighborhood where we had a lake in our backyard, Lake Erie. We had a Baptist camp on one side of the neighborhood, woods with ravines and creeks on the other side, walking distance from my grade school, and we were everywhere in that neighborhood. We hiked through the Baptist camp, and we would go down to the lake. We were only up to our ankles. There were rules we followed. And we climbed, like the adventure. I can tell you how many times I've fallen out of a tree, and, you know, I fell riding my bike, Mom. I wasn't climbing a tree. And like, you know, the stories we would tell about our injuries, you know, and none of them were true. We would still, like, you know, not that there's kids in the room, but, you know, we would kind of steal matches from the I don't even remember her name, but they lived right on the lakefront. The little girl, her mom smoked, and she would always be like, I got matches. And we learned how to start fires in the woods, you know? But it was this, yeah, well, it was this adventure. We'd go into the woods, and we'd swing on ravines, you know, swing over the ravines on vines. And I mean, it was stuff that you do as a kid. And it was, we sled ride, you know, we had a sled riding hill right in our backyard. So in the wintertime, we were outside all the time. And I noticed with my own niece and nephew, who are now in their early 20s, that was not their experience. Like, oh, if they ride their bikes, make sure that you watch where they go when you stand at the end of the street. There was a fear for my sister when I would go and take care of them, and they would go on trips and stuff. Like, oh, you have to make sure and check in. And my mom's like, go outside, and I'll see you when it gets dark.
Yeah.
And we went everywhere.
Yeah, and I think that's a valuable experience to share. I know that that's becoming rarer and rarer. And for a site like Oakley in particular, Indian Hill, Bond Hill, Price Hill, Park Hills, very, very different environments that kids are growing up. They're coming to the same site. Yes.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest detriments is not just, parental fear, but societal fear. So for instance, I'm a single mom. My kids play outside a lot because I'm at work and that's what they do. But I mean, there is constantly like a fear because, like my kids, whenever they were a couple years ago, they would walk 3 blocks to my parents' house on the way home from school. And some neighbors stopped my parents and they were like, we don't like that the kids are walking home from school because, there's semi-truck drivers that go along this road and that's just not safe. And there is a constant fear as a parent that, society is judging you. And what do you do with that? What do you do whenever people are like, well, your kids shouldn't be playing outside alone and why aren't you supervising? And it's not, just the parents that are the issue now. It's society as a rule feels the need to helicopter over all the different kids and, judge anybody that is letting their kids play outside and anybody whose kids aren't attended.
Yeah, and I think that it would be, I think that's a valuable point of view for sure. And I see that as I interact with parents, even in the normal kinds of things, like dropping a kid off in 5th grade and hovering at the window. 5th grade, so I definitely see like symptoms of that everywhere. I'm reminded of what Jesus shows us earlier of, hey, don't resent any of the people who are caring for kids who are bringing kids to a space like this. I'm of the opinion you guys don't need another thing to worry about. Like, you should be able to come to Kids Club. This should be welcoming and safe. You should be able to know your kids are having fun. Because it's getting rarer and rarer and rarer that there's a place that can provide all of those things. So to bring us back into some of the content here, this is good. I'm already feeling like, man. Yeah. Okay. I want to get into how to lead a game. If you're joining us online, go to the 7 Sins of Game Leading. It's done by the Source for Youth Ministry. Go ahead and tab over and check that out. This is something, I think I shared this maybe a year or 2 ago with some K-5 folks. We're going to watch this, and then some of us are going to lead all of us in the game because sitting for 74 minutes is not fun plus kids, right? So without further ado.
Hey everybody! You guys ready? We're gonna play a game. It's gonna be a really fun game. Is everyone ready? Okay guys, this next game is gonna be so much fun. We're gonna use paper bags and some string. And I don't have my string. Office. So I'm gonna go find it. Just sit tight. Actually, do you have strings? Here's your string.
It's a student ministry video.
Yes. Go.
So I was at Walmart last night. This lady totally cut me off.
Yes, you don't have to. This is so mad. I know. Like, so frustrating. This next game is going to be really fun. You're going to take a spoon and tie it to your ear.
Your partner's going to come and take the spoon off of your ear using your mouth. And like that, take the spoon off your ear. Someone else is going to have a fork and they're going to be punching it at this alligator inner tube thing that we have. So just go ahead and line up, get started, and make sure that the alligator is in every.
2, 3, 4. You're 5. Ah, you missed. Hey kids. This next game is gonna be on all interviewing on first. I'm gonna take the beard. I'm gonna put it on his face. Strawberry. Oh my goodness, this is so hilarious. Jasmine is being covered with whipped cream right now. This is so funny. I'm so sorry for those of you who can't see it, but everyone in the first row can. I will help can't because everyone's in the way. This is hilarious. Oh my goodness. I wish you could see it. I can't believe you can't see
it. What a trooper.
Yeah.
So what I take away from that, aside from I'm glad that we don't throw milkshakes at people, is we want to follow the KISS rule. We want to keep it short and simple. I think the 30-second rule is a good rule of thumb. That's the rule that I use if I'm prepping to do connect time, or if I'm doing a game in the midst of a large group. I will try to model that in a second. I'll explain what we're about to do next. Being prepared, that's more than half the battle. If you know the point of the game, man, being prepared is huge when you're trying to create a fun environment. On that note, I feel like for those first two kind of rules, anytime that I've been in a situation where, like, my wife and I are hanging out with some folks, and somebody's like, "Oh, we should play this game," and we've never heard of the game, and then it turns into like this 15 to 20 minute conversation about how fun that game is. By the end of that discussion, nobody wants to play that game because it's just taken so much time to explain it. You know, that's why, like, does anybody play euchre in here? Yeah. You ever try to teach somebody to play euchre?
Yeah.
Like, by the end of it, you're like, I don't want to play euchre anymore.
It's too hard.
If we keep it short, we keep it simple, if we're ready to lead the game, not just that we know what the game is, but do we know the sequence of how to explain the game in a way that makes sense? That's helpful. One of the things I do to prep also is a lot of the games that are in our Connect Time lessons and stuff, they're not games we made up. Like, we found them on YouTube, we found them online. And so if you look up the name of the game, you can probably find some folks showing you kids playing the game. And you can get a sense of the feel and the tone that's best as you're setting the game up. And finally, get involved. It personally bums me out when I see that volunteers are in rooms and there's zero connecting with kids happening during free play time. Like, man, hang out, play basketball, or play checkers, or whatever's going on. Like, we want to connect before we get into all of the other stuff. So those are my things. And let's practice. So I need a volunteer. A volunteer.
Good job.
Yeah. All right. Matt,
So the milkshake.
I want to celebrate people who are brave.
Thank
This is a $10 gift card to iTunes. Thank you for being brave to be our first volunteer. Just please get something fun. Yeah. Not something that you feel like, oh, people would really respect me if they saw that I had this album.
Right.
Something that's just fun for you.
Right.
All right?
Class lips.
You promise us that?
Touche.
Great. For those of you who are serving this coming weekend, which is going to be great. It's going to be a lot of fun as we're handing out T-shirts. Wicked smart. This is free prep time. We're going to play the Connect Time game for pre-K, kindergarten, second grade, and third grade. I don't know which one this is, but go ahead and take a look-see at that. And we're all going to participate. Matt is being brave to be the person who's like on the spot reading this and trying to process this while all of us are looking at him. He's being really, really brave, so we're going to be brave too, and we're just going to cut loose.
You got this, man.
Oh, boy.
You got
All
this.
right?
Thank you.
To buy our boy just a little bit more time. You're taking my
Yeah.
let's go ahead and get rid of our trash. Go ahead and there's a trash can right there in the back. That buys you.
Yes. Got it.
And let's be real. Sometimes you're not prepped, and this is the way you're leading Connect Time.
I go, no, and he's like, I'll take it.
I know. I just needed to start doing random things.
I know.
Adventure Club, see who follows.
Hey, Chris, do people in Adventure Club get the games we get as Connect Time?
There,
to do?
we'll talk about that in a second. Typically, there's no lesson content.
It's chaos management.
Oh, yeah.
It's Montessori.
Oh, gosh.
It really. A wannabe.
How do you feel? All right, look at that. Look at that. All right. It's yours, man.
Everybody else, you need to clap your hand. Start rubbing.
Oh.
Hey, let's give him a round of applause. Well done. Well done. What I loved about that was how brief your instructions were, and then you just took us for a like we just had to keep watching. You did all that without verbal cues, man. Yes. All right, let's do one more. One more. And then the volunteer. All right.
Can I say something? Well, can I say something about?
Yes.
I'll volunteer, but can I say something about the game?
Yes.
So I've played that game before, and if you circle kids up, you can get them to you can have it progress by going around and having them do the motions as you go around and kind of like point at them. And then when you're done, it's really quiet, and it's a great way to then have them go sit down on the carpet. You don't have to raise your voice. They're all attentive. If you're in the center of the circle, or you can have another kid leading it, they're ready to go. That's the beauty of that game.
Yeah. Part of the beauty of that too is it's almost like if you've ever watched a Bobby McFerrin concert where he like gets the audience involved. You know what I'm talking about. All right, we'll talk about it.
Some of us know Bobby
Rich
McFerrin.
Brown used to do this before every concert, too.
All right.
You want me to do this?
If you were volunteering. Oh, and let's give Jeanette a second. So just mingle among yourselves. Just just talk for a second.
We could go get our trash out.
Yeah, Dan, that's great. Why don't you do this? It's great multitasking, right? Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna need you to split into two groups. How about just down the middle? You go this way, Nate, you go this way. So two groups, circle up as best you can.
We can move furniture too.
We can sit. We can stand.
Go ahead.
Adios, Stanley.
You can eat them.
It's not like they
Here's some
decided to
fruit.
do.
Okay.
Hi, everybody! I was a kid here.
Is it really live?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was watching it on YouTube on my way here.
Okay. What? So now that we're in our groups, I'm going to give you a theme, and this is that kind of a this is a game that you're just going to have to be a little creative and think fast. So we're going to start with one person. It's going to go around the circle. You pick which way, and the theme's going to be animals. Everyone needs to come up with a different animal, and if I say penguin, then the next person in line needs to come up with an animal that begins with the letter N. And if you can't come up with that animal in 20 seconds, you got to start all over.
Oh, that does take.
Ready, set, go.
I'm measuring. Who do we start with?
Alligator.
Rhino.
Super.
So it's
Dog.
Octopus.
Gorilla. So letter.
Antelope.
Hesitation.
What was it?
I said hesitation.
What animal starts with S?
I don't know. Someone else to help.
Snake.
Got it.
Elephant.
Tiger.
Tiger. Let's go. Grand Guilty.
Rhinos are comfortable.
Why not?
Use them?
You can do that.
Sure, rhino.
Do we already
You're getting a root.
that?
Octopus. Snake.
Okay, we're going to change
You're
themes
getting a root.
now.
There, nice.
Food.
Killer.
Food.
Yummy. Speak my heart. Pasta.
Food.
Applesauce. Seems just that easier.
Eggplant.
I'm like, what? Taco.
Yes. Taco.
Orange.
Edamame.
That was a goodie.
Edamame.
Enchilada, that's a good one.
Apples.
Soup.
What'd you say? Pistachio.
All right, sir. Party of your house.
Oh. You know, it's when it comes to you, you're like, your brain
Yeah,
burned, but then like everybody else, you're like, I can think of it real quick.
Next topic.
Oyster.
TV
Oyster.
shows.
Man, these guys
I'm
are
so bad
at
TV shows.
Oh, TV shows.
TV shows.
TV shows. What TV show do you like?
Full House.
Full House.
Could be an online show.
She even makes something up we probably wouldn't know.
Echo Fighting 2. Playing the thing, I don't even know what that is. Probably exists somewhere. Internet people probably exists somewhere.
So what is it called? Echo Fighting?
Yeah,
Echo
Echo
Fighting.
Fighting.
That's a G.
Okay. Fighting.
G. Gilmore Girls. Ooh,
Yeah, that's it.
I was
We're on
Please.
the last season.
Don't do S.
Oh, nothing else. We're on the-
Supergirl. There you go. That's a good
Oh.
one. Supergirl.
How about the news?
Watching TV.
I don't either.
Ladder House or something. I feel like that's probably a thing.
Ladder 49 or something.
Yeah, there's
Ladder.
something with there's still with firefighters.
Ladder 49.
There you
That's
go.
Okay, so are we doing a number or
Yeah.
letter?
It's a movie, but it's still a thing.
So let's have a seat.
It's good. Yeah, okay.
And on that note.
TV show is hard.
Uh-huh. That one was a lot.
Okay, let's give Jeanette a round of applause. What I liked about the way you facilitated that, aside from the very quick division of groups, like they showed in the video, don't take a lot of time with that, was also you were a presence, but you weren't like interfering with everything. Like you were keeping things moving and kind of waiting until it got to that moment where now let's switch. But you weren't trying to referee each thing. You were kind of just overseeing.
I was watching to see how if each group got to go around at least once with a few, you know. at the end, I really wanted to like ask some questions about the game because that's the facilitator in me. I facilitate a lot for work. Because I've been taught, you know, all games are like experiential learning and you need to debrief. Not a lot, but I might ask the kids, what did you like? What did you not like? Did you learn anything? Would you change anything? Just some questions to help them think through what they were doing. So they make meaning of it. But that's me.
Cool. The experience playing a game is way different from the experience leading. The same way that participating in a journey group is very different from leading a journey group. The experience of being a volunteer is way different from trying to build a volunteer team and lead that team. So what we need to do is practice. And for me, the way that I think I grew the most as a volunteer was through presentation. It's something that's very near and dear to my heart. Those people know me well. You know, that's I could talk about talking. But I just wanted to briefly touch on some presenter basics. Because we represent a lot of different age group serving teams in here, I don't want to get granular in a lot of the details of presentation, but just skimming on the surface, these are 3 things. If you're interested in that, or if you're trying to lead somebody through that, or if you are an experienced presenter and you're just looking to sharpen up, these are some things to keep in mind. And also, before we kind of get to question and answer and stuff, these are for you guys. These are, they're not fancy or anything. These are just like little cards. You can take whatever color you like, except for the colors that aren't in that stack. But go ahead and take one, pass that around. This is your takeaway card. This is literally something you can take away with you. And they are just the right size to go into your name tag slot right here. So if you came to fall training, I know some breakout groups did that. Some groups like went ahead and wrote prayers in the backs. And the great thing about this is if you put something on the back of your name tag, every time that you put your name tag on, there's a reset. What's the thing that I'm trying to do? What's the thing I'm trying to do? So I'd encourage you to go ahead and make one of those. If there's anything you're taking away from this training, man, by all means, grab a pen, write something down. That way you can literally take it away with you and see it every time you serve. Great. Presenter basics. You are equipped as a presenter with some basic training. Hopefully you'll be able to shadow somebody as you kind of embark on that journey. But when the time comes for you to actually present, to prepare for a lesson, you can always find the lessons online at crossroadskidsclub.net/weekend. That's the Kids Club website. You can also find it like on our Facebook page and stuff like that. If you read your weekly emails, there's always a link to them in there. And when you get to the page that has the lessons and the videos and stuff on our website, we plan 2 weeks out to have those lessons up there. So if you know you're out this coming weekend, but you might be presenting the following weekend, we have 2 weeks worth of stuff out there. If you need to plan even farther out than that, just get in touch with your ministry lead, your staff lead. They can do that stuff. To give you an idea of the scope and sequence of what we do in Kids Club, we have a master curriculum that spans 3 years from the present day. So we can pull up this thing and we can see the lesson we're going to do the 3rd weekend in October of 2020. That's how far out we want to plan. That's how far out we need to be able to resource things for lessons and all of that fun stuff. And there's a whole machine that goes into creating a good lesson, something that we believe is spirit-breathed, something that speaks to kids of multiple learning styles, and is appropriate for kids in the age group that we serve. All of that said, the lesson is not the goal. The lesson is your tool. The lesson is not your goal. The lesson is your tool. Kids Club is many things. It is not a school. We will never have a Bible memorization competition in Kids Club. Reading the Bible is great. Memorizing the Bible and having those words written on your heart are fantastic things to do. But for the new kid coming in who doesn't understand what the Bible is, doesn't have things memorized, that can be the most unwelcoming, unfun, and perhaps even emotionally unsafe place if they walk into a place where that's the expectation. All right? So your lesson is the tool, it is not the goal. Do the lesson like it's made by smart people. I don't make them myself, but I work with some of those folks. They're wicked smart. So they're not wicked. They're very but it's your tool, it's not the goal. It's the tool for connection. We want to connect with kids. If you're ever in this room, and by the way, you're welcome in this room anytime that the room's open. We have KC 101 in here, but aside from that, if you want to come in here and pray before the hour, you want to have donuts for your team after serving, whatever you want to do, like this room is not my room, it's our room. But if you're ever in here, take a look at this poster that we have on the wall here. It says at the top, when we serve kids, we serve Jesus. And I don't know like how long this poster has not been a thing that we hand out regularly. But you can take a picture of that. You can make it your wallpaper on your phone. Or you don't have to do that either. But it's full of things that are the DNA of Kids Club. If you want to know like the way that we talk about things, especially as a staff, the things that we train on a regular basis, a lot of them are represented there. Fun fact about this poster, we put all of our assets online. They're all free. We believe churches should share, and we don't require anybody to pay anything for Kids Club stuff. We have found out accidentally that Kids Club is being used by daycares in Kansas. Every weekend, their videos are our videos. Lessons are being used at a church in Florida that has even taken our logo. If you're watching this, please give our logo back. I'm kidding, we keep using it. They've made a few changes. And we've also found that the stuff that's been translated into other languages, particularly the ones in Mandarin, have more views than some of the same videos in English. And in a lot of Mandarin circles in China, they're watching it here because it's illegal to do this. So it's kind of a mind-blowing thing. Anyway, but the point of all of that stuff is not that we want to have an educational environment or an educational experience. It's similar, but that's not the goal. That's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is create connections. So if you're doing the lesson and it's going great, but there's no connection between you and kids, we count that as a miss. We count that as a massive miss. If things are kind of getting tight time-wise and you blow through small group because we just got to do the lesson, that's a huge miss. There are kids who want to process. There are kids who have questions. And if we just overwhelm with us trying to get through stuff as fast as we possibly can because we need to do the lesson, it's a huge miss. That kills a relationship when you feel like the other person just wants you to stop talking. Right? And preparation is essential. It's not optional. It's not optional. I mean, of course, it's not something that we can necessarily enforce, but if you're going to be a presenter, I like to say that the Spirit favors the prepared. I'm not presenting with notes up here, bless you. And that's not because I'm not prepared. That's because I worked on this stuff this morning. I've been working on it all week. And there are things that have happened in this room, comments that have been made or discussions that have happened that are completely the Spirit. But I'm not equipped to facilitate that in this kind of a setting unless I'm prepped. So, prepare. For those of you who are interested in presenting or do it regularly, please prep. If you're having difficulties with doing that, you need more tools to prep, let's talk. And finally, so again, that's really skimming on the surface here. The reason that Presenter Basics is included in the fun and kids training is the presenter in many ways is the heartbeat and the tone of your room. It's the person who sets the tone for the biggest kind of chunk that we've prepared. And you got all the toys. You've got videos, you've got clickers, you've got a microphone, you've got all that stuff. If you keep it fun and keep your focus on the kids, further resources, because learning, growth happens in circles, not in rows. But you can get a lot more resourcing and stuff than exists just at these trainings. And I would really encourage you, if any of this fascinates you or you're intrigued by any of this stuff, these are the things that build into me. And so I just want to share them with you. The Whole Brain Child is first because it's first. This book is about 220 pages long, but it is a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. There are many copies at the Cincinnati Public Library, as well as Campbell County and Kenton County Library. Checked. If you can't find one, we've got a bunch of copies here. I would love for you to have one for free the next time that you're here on the weekend. We can talk about that. Free to Play is Dr. Gray's book. He's the guy who did that TED Talk. Quiet is a book about introverts. Last year, it was the most significant, meaningful book that I read. It's made me a better husband. My wife is an introvert. It's made me a better presenter. A lot of the things that we do at Crossroads are big and extroverted and loud. And yet, I don't know about your Bible. My Bible tells me there was a prophet once who ran and hid in a cave. And then there was a storm, and God wasn't in the storm. And then there was fire, and God wasn't in the fire. There was all of these big, loud, momentous things. God wasn't in any of those things. Sometimes he's a whisper. And if we're not caring for introverts in our midst, if we're only doing the loud, in-your-face, brash stuff, we're doing a massive, massive disservice. So definitely check out Quiet, especially if you're an introvert and you sometimes feel uncomfortable in extroverted environments. Podcasts, there's one called Wow in the World. It's an NPR podcast. It's created by the people who created the TED Radio Hour podcast. It's about science and technology, but it's all aimed at kids. If you're a parent or you watch kids regularly and you want kids to engage with some stuff digitally, but not a screen, podcasts are great ways of doing that, like in the car or during some time at home or something like that. Wow in the World is a science podcast designed for kids, and I'm telling you, I learned stuff by listening to Wow. Their latest episode is a sampler of a lot of different kid podcasts. So I wouldn't listen to the latest one unless you're interested in learning more about kid podcasts in general. The one that they published, I think, on Sunday is about brain freezes, which is a really fascinating topic, as it turns out. I just listened to that today. It's just great. And there's a character in the show who is kind of by proxy a child. It's an adult with a childlike voice. But they're reacting to things, they're asking questions the same way that a kid would, which keeps it engaging for kids, but it also is good training for us of just getting into the mind of a kid, getting into the conversation pattern of a kid. This is talking about ... Bible, because the full title is talking about the Bible. This was created by our very own May Klingler, music. She created this podcast just on her own, just because she's interested in that kind of stuff. She sits down with her nieces, her nephews, with kids she knows, and they just go through a story in the Bible, and they talk about it. And we've heard, after she rolled that out, just I think through Facebook and Instagram, she rolled that out, and we heard back from a lot of parents where they were like, this helps me disciple my child. Like, hearing the way she talks with kids, and she's a wizard at it. Like, she takes them seriously, she laughs at their jokes, it's really great, it's good training. And then finally, if you haven't served in Adventure Club, serve in Adventure Club sometime. If you want to explore the concept of fun and kids without needing to make sure that a lesson gets done or something like that, do a cycle in Adventure Club. I wouldn't say, Matt would probably say join his team, right? I wouldn't say jump from your current team if you've got a healthy, good team and you like the connections you have there. But taking a weekend and going into Adventure Club is a great opportunity for you to just see, can I engage with kids when there's no lesson, when there's no agenda, when there's no any of that, just on their level. We're gonna watch a movie, or what are the kinds of things you guys do?
Oh gosh. Well, movies one of them. We have crafts in there, so we got the quiet room and the active room. So movie and crafts and snacks are all happen in the quiet room. And for the active room, we're just throwing balls around. And that's pretty much it.
they make up their own games,
Mhm.
and they love foosball and air hockey, and they chase each other. So, and the scooters, those things. It's, I mean, there's no organized game. I might do one every so often, but that's a rarity. It's just they create their own games.
And I love the way you're saying that. We didn't plan on this, but they create their own games. That's something I was always really struck by working at the theater. Is if you guys know what improv is, improvisation, that stresses out adults. Kids dig it. They love it because they're not overthinking all the social cues and stuff. When they get to a certain age, they are. But it's just a game. And in theater, like I would always say, it's called a play for a reason. It should feel fun. It should feel but the truth is, kids are improvising anytime they're playing. If you've ever done the Flores Lava game, like you're hopping from thing to thing, and then now this person like has a leg that's like, been boiled off or something, and then this person's our guide, and you're trying to get up the volcano. Like that's a massive improvisational game. It's very complex. It's fascinating. But you're right.
I did that Flora, like the thing that was popular, like hashtag Flora's Lava at 11:45 one time, and like kids were actually dying in the lava because kids were getting on top of kids, like, save me, you got me, you're my bro, and I was like, oh, you're dead, sorry. But it was a fun game.
When kids got picked up, their parents were like, did you have fun? Absolutely. Right. Final thing that I'll point you to as a further resource, Kids Club created a child care team booklet. This is for folks on the child care team who not always, they don't always walk into Kids Club understanding what Kids Club is or understanding the environment they're trying to create. So it's just a really quick booklet that has like some basic tips, just a really quick primer. And it's got lists and lists and lists of games. So if you ever want to just sharpen on the skill of pick a random game from that book, can I teach this game in 30 seconds or less? That's a great resource for you. We've got some copies in this building, but a lot of them are just look around the website. There are more things that we could talk about, absolutely. You can probably tell I love to talk. But to close, remember that Jesus was fun. Jesus didn't resent those who brought kids. Jesus tells us to see the world as kids do. And if anybody has any questions, if you guys have any questions, if anybody's alive right now, I'd love to field any of those in the next 10, 15 minutes.
Can I share another resource?
Sure.
Joanne Deek, who actually is from Dayton area, has written a lot of books about the brain and kids' brains. I just heard her speak at the Girl Scout National Convention. She was fabulous. But she's got the owner's manual for driving your adolescent brain. She's got a kid's book, Your Fantastic Elastic Brain, Stretch It, Shape It, and then How Girls Thrive. And it's an essential guide for educators and parents, but it's talks about how boy brains and girl brains develop differently and how they process things differently. And it was extremely insightful to learn all of this about kids. So it makes you think differently about how you approach a boy versus a girl about things and why play is important and challenging them to do something that's completely different than what is normally done. So they're fabulous resources.
Thanks for sharing that. Any other questions? Comments, wisecracks? I'll just fill a little bit of silence for you guys. I like doing new things, and I actually love feedback. So if you have feedback on what it's better, things that made this agonizing for you, or whatever. This is the first one we've done. The future of KC 201 is roughly on Wednesday nights. That's when my wife has choir practice. So that's when I'll be here. And it's not every Wednesday, but like probably every other Wednesday. We're just going to pick a different intersection of fun, welcoming, safe, or kids, families, volunteers, and just try to go deeper on that subject. I'm not big on training that's conceptual only. I like to do things that are tangible and practical. And that's part of why I ended up doing CrossFit. feel free to email it to me or get it up through your staff. Or you can just tell me tonight. I'm not going to freak out about feedback. Yes, sir.
So what is like, can you just like give us like 3-5 tips about like best things to do like with an introvert in your group on like how to adapt to be with them?
Sure. I think the first, that's a really good question. So if the question is 3 to 5 tips on connecting with introverts. One of my favorite stories in the book Quiet, it's one of the first things she shares. She goes to a conference. Who's the self-help guy who does big conferences? Tony
Robbins.
Yeah, Tony Robbins. She goes to a Tony Robbins thing because she hears like he's amazing, and this is extrovert culture to the nth degree. And she has anybody gone to one?
No, I'm too scared.
You guys know Victor or Riza? They're junkies on it. Sorry, guys. They like go all the time. Anyway, she goes to a Tony Robbins thing, and she goes to the registration desk to like pick up her packet and her lanyard and stuff. And the woman on the other side of the desk goes, "Are you excited?"
Just like that. Just like
yeah. And she's like, "Sure." Just take my stuff, you know. And then she gets in line to go in the auditorium, and there's like the music playing, and there's lights going and stuff. And she's already the author of this book's an introvert. She's already dreading. Like, how long is this? I have to go into that. And there's a guy at the door high-fiving everybody and like fist bumping and like full-on hugging people. And she's thinking, as the line inches forward, she's thinking, don't have it. Just don't. Like, come on, you don't have to do this. And he's like, "Are you excited?" You know, just really big and kind of big face. And that turned her off for the whole thing. That at the door, at the threshold of this experience, turned her off for everything else. She didn't become a participant at that point. She became a critic at that point. So I'd say tip number 1, if there's a kid coming to the room who isn't sure about coming to Kids Club, whether they're new or not, like getting more in your face isn't the answer. I'd say the real thing to do, give some time, give some space. Parents, field that one, because maybe the kid's not going to come to Kids Club today. Like, we don't know. Something like that to happen. But I know from personal experience, if I'm feeling scared or nervous, somebody getting in my face and yelling and trying to make me happy, so why should I expect that to be different for a kid? So that would be one thing that I'd say try not to do. A lot of times in our rooms, music gets cranked way up. In general, I think we encourage that. But if there are kids who walk into that space and they immediately go to the corner, or they immediately like just need some time to themselves. I used to be the guy at the door who was like, "Come on, aren't you like excited to be here?" And that never worked. And then I read this book, and I tried some of the things she talks about in the book, and hot dog, it worked. There was one girl who came in at 6:15. It was in kindergarten. I remember this very, very clearly. We had some music playing, and kids were kind of milling around, and she just very clearly, like, she did all of the introvert things. Like, she avoided the large crowd. She didn't want to make eye contact. She kind of like literally introvert. And then she went and sat down and started crying quietly. And this is a girl that I've seen in Kids Club plenty of times. So it was like, this isn't separation anxiety, it's something like that. And so, like, the book instructed me to, instead of getting in her face, I casually sat nearby and pretended to be doing something else and just mentioned, like, sometimes I get scared too. Let me tell you about a time that I got scared. I walked into a new place. I was the new kid in school. I didn't know anybody, and there was all this stuff going on. And I was just really scared. There were so many kids there, and I just didn't want to. I remember what that was like. And then this girl opens up and starts talking to me about her day. That's not like a magic wand thing that's going to work on every single night. but a lot of times I think we have to fight our impulse to try to force the emotion we want to see onto somebody who's not feeling. So those are, I guess, 2 things. Yes.
So I have introduced, I recognize the introverts because I'm one myself, and I've introduced other kids that to the new kids that are maybe are in the corner. I did this past weekend. There's a girl sitting near the stage by herself during free time, and I just went up to her and I'm like, hey, how you doing today? And I just casually talked, and then I said, have you met Hilda? Hilda's been here. She's a veteran. She knows the ropes because she was new. So if you have any questions, Hilda will be able to answer them. And then I asked her some questions like, so, where do you go to school? What do you like? And I just quietly talked to her and introduced her to Hilda. And Hilda was like, oh, I go to this school. And so she had someone that she didn't have to be pals with, but she at least knew a name and knew it was safe to go ask another child for something or ask me. I introduced myself as well. So, and I'm like, it's okay to be just observing. It's okay. If you need anything, you let me know. And
that's good to be able to know the kids that are in your room typically at your hour to be able to say, this is a gift that this kid has. And frankly, what a great space for Hilda to practice evangelizing. Like just introducing herself to people and helping them say like what would our schools look like if kids were learning that kind of thing here and taking that back to their schools? What would families look like if more of that was happening? That's great. I want to honor your guys' time. We're 2 minutes till 8, and then we'll be done officially. But if anybody has any last thoughts or questions.
I thought tonight was great, and I can't wait to see what the other KC201 has to offer.
Me too. We're firing from the hip. We're going like we need to be done.
I think people want more trainings. They don't know exactly what they want, but just to be a part of something and to see familiar faces is really nice as well. I also just want to do a quick input. I started doing 11:45. I was 8:30 for 2.5 years, and now I'm doing 11:45. And it's a chaotic hour. I mean, it is just a different hour than what I was used to. And the other volunteers in there were what we would consider like warm bodies. They weren't confident in like leading, but at the same time, they knew they were serving, and so that was their heart, was just to serve. They didn't want to control anything, and I was just like, sweet. And so once we started getting the consistency of kids, we started realizing the misbehaved kids, and we don't want to downgrade their fun, right? Like, to make it about fun. And so we were all trying to collaborate on how we can continue their fun. So we created leadership roles in the room. And so now we have light leadership, we have microphone leadership, we have remote leadership, curtain leadership, snack leadership. So there's like 8 different leaderships in the room, and every week a new leader has to lead somebody else doing it who's never done it before. And it creates the environment like so much more fun. And also they get to leave saying that they led somebody that day to their parent, which like tingles my arms because I'm like, that's just what it's all about, being God, like leading people to like lead others. So that's one of our fun things that we've done so far in Kids or
You know what I want to happen? I want kids to hear the leaders first in their church. I want them for that to click there. Not when they become the captain of the football team. Not when like they're praised for some other kind of thing, and then leadership and identity becomes that thing. Like I want them to know now.
Well, I think for the leaders that were in that room, the best part about it was that the leaders who were scared to give discipline, like for the kids who are roughhousing or misbehaving, the attitude of those children totally changed when you gave them a leadership role. And then when the week they weren't leading, they were like more behaved because they knew somebody else was leading. So it was really cool to see how not only it changed the fun environment for kids, but for the leaders to open up as well.
Would anybody like to pray us out? Anybody feeling like they should do that?
I can pray.
Thanks, Heather.
Dear Father God, we are so honored to be here today. We are so thankful that we can come together in a group. We are thankful that we have a guide and leader, Chris, who bring us together to help us grow, to help us be in our individual rooms with these kids. Just guide us in our hearts. Help us to hear from these kids. Help us to listen to these kids. Help us to learn with these kids and help us to connect with these kids and to spread your kingdom in your heart. Father, in your name, we are so grateful and we worship you. Amen. Thank you, Mother.
Thanks, friends. Thanks very much.
You're the one that taught us.
I need to get a mouse behind this screen.
Darn natural extroverts.
Thank you, Chris. Christina officially said she does come in and help out to meet herself a name today.
One of my favorite student volunteers.
Hey, I was going to ask you, can we do a Wednesday night student volunteer?
Yeah, I think that's actually really great.
Because I have to say, like, I love the fact that you guys have the kids volunteering. I know so many kids, like, she can't wait to be a volunteer. I was teaching last week with somebody who had a yellow thing, and they were like, yeah, my son, he just turned 10, so he's so excited to be a volunteer. And I think it's a great way to, you know, not only show leadership to the kids, but then also train them as they become adults and as they become men to lead in the church as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And we recognize that's
I'm serious. Yeah, I played for the. Who's your
we
mom?
made it easier for us to
Okay.
actually teach them, or we hope they just catch it.
Yeah. Because I'm holy cow, you could do so much just with, you know, public speaking and things like that, just standing up and, you know, reading through the lesson and just practicing that type of stuff, you know, praying.
We're working with Josh Ridgway.
No, I honestly, I don't like I was just saying like that.
What
It's
about
not fine
Wednesday
art
nights? I
fun.
mean, we don't do anything
Yeah,
for
I
kids on
just
Wednesday
haven't been
nights.
able to play.
And a lot
I've
of the
been
kids,
trying-
you
I've
know,
been trying to
in order to be a student volunteer, your parents have to volunteer with you.
You go to-
When kids come, they go to a kids student volunteer class. I mean, I can help out with leading it as long as it's every other week. And then, you know, I could help out with running the student volunteer class. Parents come to the parent volunteer class, and then
lunch hours.
I work every other Wednesday, so I can't always promise that I can be
Yeah,
out.
sure, right.
But
Well,
this Wednesday I don't work, so that's
yeah. Let me shut this off and then. Bye. Thanks for watching, guys.